Listen to the Vibes.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. And I'm very happy to welcome Paul Zolman here. Now, he is a author and a love language linguist. All right, I want you to explain to me what that is.
Glad to be here, Kyle. Thank you. A love language linguist is someone that knows all the five love languages that Dr. Gary Chapman identified back in his book, and the five love languages in 1992. So what I've done is I've made it easy for you to understand how to obtain, just the understanding of all those five love languages by giving it away. And so that's by giving it away, I've come to know all of them. I can give it away, and then I can see it come in my way. That's what I'm calling a love language linguist.
Well, before we get any deeper into this, tell us a little bit more about you.
Well, Kyle, I was raised in Montana, and you would think that in Montana I'd be wearing a cowboy hat and that sort of thing, but not so. In fact, I have a funny story that when I was 17, I had moved in with my brother, and he was subsequently got transferred to California. I was dating this girl in California, and she had a horse, and she thought, I'm from Montana, I should be able to ride a horse. And so I'd seen all the John Wayne movies and everything. I grabbed that saddle horn, I kicked my leg up, and I flew all the way over onto the other side of the horse, landed on my rear on the other side. And we both had a great laugh about it. But I was raised actually in a city in Montana. It was probably one of the largest cities. I was raised in Great Falls, Montana. But in that upbringing, I also there was a lot of abuse in the home. My father only had an 8th grade education. I think that you learn from your parents what their parents taught them. And after understanding that, realized that my father, my grandfather, my father's father, passed away when he was just 10 years old. So imagine there's a lot of holes in his upbringing that way, of how to be a father and what to do that way. And he just became angry quite a bit. I'm number 10 of 11 children, and you can imagine that when my mother and father had a date every Friday night when he came home from work, and it was always at the Maverick Bar. It was always over alcohol, and my mother would probably, I can imagine this, but I was never there, but I can imagine that my mother started maybe at the oldest of the children, and by the time it gets down to me, I'm number 10. By the time it got down to me, my father is pretty agitated. And I realized that he's got annoyance on top of annoyance, on top of annoyance, on top of annoyance, all stacking all those annoyances until it blows. And so it was proper for him, I suppose, to blow by the time it got to child number 10. And I'm actually a thorn between two roses. I'm a boy between two girls at the very end. All the rest are boys. So boys will be boys, and it's like when puppies play, Kyle. They're grabbing each other's neck, and they're biting, and they're whacking, and they're doing that sort of thing. That's kind of what our family was like, but even more severe from my father. So I'd either get the belt or I'd get severe spanking on the weekends, and I always dreaded the weekends just because I don't remember what I did earlier in the week, but obviously my mother did remember. Told my father, and I received the wrath of my father on the weekends. So it was really kind of a harsh situation. I had a lot of anger that I retained from that as I grew up, and I a lot of blame that I did to my father. In fact, I was 35 years old before I stopped blaming my father. I finally realized that, I'm responsible for what I do. Mm-hmm. And so I started thinking, well, how can I be more positive send out more positive vibes, so to speak, about being less angry and forgiving my father, because I realized that if I can blame somebody for my problems, I don't have to change. It's their problem. It's their fault. If I can blame them, I can stay right where I'm at, right in my comfort zone, right in my little comfy box. That's what I can do. And when I realized that, I thought, I got to stop blaming him. At 35 years old, my father had been dead 7 years already. And here I was blaming him, and he had no opportunity to refute, no opportunity to defend himself or anything like that. I said, I've got to start taking responsibility all the way to age 35. Now, I think we can teach it a lot sooner than that, but it was 35 years old for me. So I think that this anger, this stacking of anger, the annoyance over annoyance over annoyance and flashing was something that was passed down probably from my grandfather or even farther back to my father and then to me. And I said, this really has to stop. And what really came to a head, Kyle, was when I was dating about 15 years ago. My first marriage ended, and I was probably contributory to that because of the anger issues. But when I was dating about 15 years ago, after that first divorce, I was getting interested in this person. I took this person to my brother's house because you always have to have big brother approval. Took her up there. My sister-in-law whisked her aside and said, the only emotion that the Zolman family learned growing up was anger. First I denied it, said, then it made me mad. I thought, she nailed it. And I thought, if that's the perception of the Zolman family, I realized that I have an opportunity right here now to change that perception. So I started reading the color code, and I started reading the 5 love languages, and I really liked the principles of the 5 love languages. I liked them because they reconciled to, Dr. Chapman identified that they reconcile to the life of Jesus Christ. And anybody knowing or believing, maybe you're not a believer, but it's fine. Jesus Christ was a fabulous person, most perfect person that's walked the earth, is what I believe. And that if I could be more like him and follow those love languages and be like him, then I'd probably be able to get to that point that I wanted to be. Not be that angry person, but be more loving. So I contacted Dr. Chapman because I didn't get the gist of the love languages. I liked the principles. I understood the principles. Application was a problem for me. Just remember where I came from. I didn't have any application. And just to have these principles now, I have the knowledge, but I don't have the application. I don't have the wisdom to put those principles into place. Dr. Chapman suggests that, well, if you guess what somebody else's love language is, like if I guess what your love language is, Kyle, and I cater to that, we're going to be buddies. I'm a really bad guesser. That's not going to happen. So that didn't work. And then the other thing Dr. Chapman has in his book is that, well, if you take this survey, then I can find out what my love language is. What am I supposed to do with that, Kyle? Advertise? Hello, Kyle. I'm Gifts. What do you have for me today? That's a little bit awkward. And that didn't work for me either. So I remembered growing up that one of the things even in that dysfunctional family, one of the things that I liked was playing games as a family, because it really kind of brought our family together. Even though there was still that smack talk and putting people down, it was all that type of things that are part of that angry culture. All those things set aside, it brought the family together. So I thought, wonder if I could make this a game. So that's when I contacted Dr. Chapman and asked him if he was licensing those little icons, the little pictures that he had for each one of the love languages. His attorney wrote me back and said, no, we're not doing that right now. So I talked to an attorney in my town, a copyright attorney, intellectual property attorney, and he said that theory is not copyrightable. Application is. So I thought that's very interesting. So I could make my own icons. I could make this a game. So that's what I did. So I created a game and I put the icons on a die. Mm-hmm. So it's really simple. Right now I'm holding up service for those of you who are listening. There's words. There's time, touch, and then the gifts. 5 love languages, 6 sides on the die. The last side is, I put a hand with a question mark on it, and that's the surprise me side. So there's just 2 instructions, Kyle. You roll the die every day. That's the love language you give away all day that day without any expectation of it ever coming back. So while you're giving it away, you're using your observation skills, and you're watching for people that light up. People that you've made their day, you've made them happy. You just take a mental note that, oh, that might be their primary love language. And you just wash, rinse, repeat, and keep feeding that in that way. You're going to make their day more than one time. So as you're making people's day, it's making you feel happier. It's making them feel happy, and they're going to spread that happiness, make other people's day within their own circle of influence. Do you feel the vibe? That's the vibe that we're trying to send out. That's the energy we're trying to send out with this role of love. And what I found is that from where I came from, my mindset from where I came from was, what's wrong with that person? Why do they do that? And it was all down that critical path of being annoyed at what somebody else was doing. I felt like I was out of my lane. I realized I was out of my lane. I have no choice in what they choose to do. It's not my call. I'm not their judge. And when I realized that, only thing as far as love goes is I can give it away and I can react when it comes my way. So after 30 days of rolling the die, I'm learning that it's randomized enough that I'm learning all 5 love languages to give it away. By doing that, what it did, it improved my peripheral vision. So no longer do I only see my primary love language, what I like, but I see all the other ways that love is expressed, as Dr. Chapman had identified. And I can say, oh, they're loving on me, and I can respond that way. Might not be my primary love language, but I can respond because I can see that they're trying to send love my way. And then it's the mindset changes from what's wrong with that person to what's right with that person. What can I love about that person? And I was so busy in that 30-day period doing that I forgot all about being angry. I forgot all about being annoyed. I forgot all about stacking those annoyances and then having the flash. So it doesn't happen anymore. I was amazed. It was like a miracle had happened in my own life on something that I had no idea that would be the result. I wanted to overcome that anger, and I needed a replacement behavior is what I needed, Kyle.
Do you counsel people one-on-one?
I'm not a licensed professional, so I do provide free advice, absolutely free advice. Yeah, at this point in time, it's totally free.
But mostly it's through your books.
Yeah, through the books. The book has a lot of examples in it right now of different people that have used the die. In fact, there's a little family and there are 5 children, and the youngest was a boy. He was only 4 years old, had older brothers. And one day he rolled physical touch, and he's jumping up and down and said, "Yes, physical touch, physical touch." And he knew him. I mean, he knew to say that because he'd been taught that what the different icons were on the die, and immediately starts beating up on his brothers. And just like I'd mentioned, like when puppies, they'll whack each other and they'll roll around and they'll wrestle each other. Little puppies will do that all the time. Imagine his older brothers were hitting on him, and that's what he thought love was. So the mother had to suppress the laughter because that was kind of not the reaction she was expecting. She had to suppress the laughter enough to just say, "Son, this would be more appropriate physical touch." And it becomes a teaching moment at that time, just so that they send out the good vibes. Thankfully, the older brothers also were there at the time of that teaching moment. So they all learned a little bit more how to refine that love when you're sending it out. That's the whole idea. If we can just become 1% better each day at loving, the world's going to be a whole lot better place.
People want to blame other people or situations on their own unhappiness, their own problems. No one wants to take accountability for their own actions.
I think that a great way to take accountability, I mean, you've got to learn what you are in the spectrum. And I want to explain maybe the spectrum a little bit easier for me. The other day I was out walking and I found this walking stick. So on the stick, on one side of the stick, it was just like this and had no bark on it or anything. One side is very smooth. Other side, though, it has some little points on it where maybe branches used to be, but it's kind of prickly there, got a little knot there, a little knot there. And I call this the naughty side of the stick and the nice side of the stick. And I'm sure Santa Claus has a stick just like that for all you kids out there. Just Santa, you got to be nice to be able to get that present. So when you look at anger, it's on the naughty side of the stick. When my sister-in-law pointed out that I was from that angry family and I was on the naughty side of the stick, I realized that I had three choices, that I could stay the same, blaming everybody else for my own problems, and I don't have to change. I don't have to do anything if I can blame other people for my problems. Or I could go to the left, become more angry, or I could go to the right, become more loving. And so if anger and love are on the opposite ends of the stick, you can see what the spectrum is. When you can self-actualize and find out where you are on that spectrum, then you've got those three choices: to stay the same, go right, left, go left. And I chose to go to the right, to be more loving. And I think that until people realize, until they have the internal gumption to be able to make the choice where they want to go, or be able to find that point that where they are on the spectrum, they really can't set any goals. They can't figure out where to go. So they've got to find where they're on the spectrum and then say, this is where I'm at, this is where I want to go, and then start moving that direction. As I mentioned a little earlier, it's really a culture. I realized that the humor or the biting humor of anger, or the words of the angry people, or the culture of anger is all in a pocket all by itself. But so is love on the other side of the spectrum. There's kind humor, and it just actually is funny, and it doesn't hurt people when the humor is sent out. It's not the sarcasm. Sarcasm to me would be on the angry side of the stick. As much as we love sarcasm in our world, it's on the angry side of the stick, because what's the opposite? Being authentic, being genuine, being gentle in that way. That would be the opposite of sarcasm. So where on the stick do we want to be? And I think you could take words like that, if whatever is in your own vocabulary, say, is that on the naughty side of the stick, or is that on the nice side of the stick? And then once you find out what's the opposite, then it's easy to move to that opposite end.
I wish I knew what to do to make that happen for everyone, because we are in a generation that seems like it's the most selfish that I've ever seen, and always playing the victim and blaming everybody else, as I said before.
Yeah.
What is it going to take to change people's mindset?
Kyle, I think that one of the things that would work is if we introduce this in the schools and just have it taught at schools, because obviously it's not being taught at home, or whatever is being taught at home is what their parents learned or their parents passed on. And understanding where I came from, that I realized it's a generational thing, that generationally it's kind of gotten a lot worse. Actually, for me, my grandfather had 19 children. My father had 11. I had 8. My children have 3. We're making it a little bit better. It's a little bit more manageable to have 3 children or 8 children rather than 19 or 11. So it's just generationally, we'll try to do things that will help, that we can manage. But I think that we really need kind of that stopgap. If we can teach this in the schools, just imagine if they every day in the schools they rolled the die at the beginning of the day. And I'm talking, we've got to start probably with the very youngest of the children. So K through 6 is what I'm talking about, where they're in the classroom at the beginning of the day and they're in the same classroom at the end of the day. They're not to the point where they're moving around. And the reason for that is, well, I guess it could work for people to move around if they rolled it in their homeroom and then they had to report at the end of the day what they rolled that day. It might be different for a lot of the children. They could do it in the junior high and middle school and high school levels as well. But if they rolled at the beginning of the day, they watch, teacher talks for 30 seconds, say, class, this is kind of what we're watching for. This is the type of behavior we're watching for today. And then at the end of the day, I've got this journal that they could write what they rolled, what opportunities they saw to love in that way, what they did about those opportunities. Suddenly, we have a reporting process. Suddenly, we have an accountability for how we acted that day. Each child is accountable for themselves. And that's the whole idea. The teacher can't be accountable for all those children. The parents can't be accountable for all those children. And what I found in this whole process is that we've got to be accountable for ourselves. I can't be complaining about what the person next to me is doing. I can praise them for what they do, but I can't complain about what they're doing. They're making their own choices. And so when we are able to take responsibility early on and train that accountability and train that responsibility, we won't end up like I did, 35 years old, and I just had just an epiphany one day that I'm responsible. And so in the early years, at 5 or 6 years old, even 4 years old, like the young boy in that family, if they can understand the pictures on the die and understand what actions are connected with that picture, I think we can retrain this next generation so that they're going to be more kind, they're going to be more gentle, going to be more loving. They send it out without any regards of ever seeing it come back, but they're trusting and planting those seeds, those vibrations, that the law of attraction or the law of the harvest, whatever you want to call it, is going to send it right back to you. I provide suggestions. I said, "You're really going to do that?"
Right.
I'm just asking. Are you really going to do that? How's that? Try to talk them through it. How's that going to turn out for you? And it's just like if I'm angry and I send that anger out, guess what? That's a boomerang. You get immediate return on that investment. So this is an investment that is slower. It's very little investment. 2 seconds to roll the die in the morning. 2 seconds a day. Everybody has 2 seconds. Everybody, if they would take the 2 seconds and set the tone for the day, it makes it intentional. It makes it purposeful. It kind of provides a theme for the day. And if they'll do that, then their day is going to be a whole lot better day, and they're going to make other people's day a whole lot better too. Stop the rage.
We were taught as small children to not be selfish, to always share and to be kind to others. I don't think they teach that in school anymore.
And I think that this kind of helps with that, knowing as far as the selfishness goes, as far as that goes, people need to understand that rolling the die is not about you. It's not about your love language. It's not about anything like that. It's about sending it out and making other people's day. You're on a mission to watch people light up. You're on a mission to light people's fires. You're on a mission to do those things that would lift the burdens of another and help them just rise up. If even though the person that's the most depressed person listening to this podcast, if you think you're down and out, if you look look around you, you can definitely find someone that's a little bit lower. And if you'll choose that day just to lift them up, lift them a little higher, it's going to lift you a little higher. It's going to help you. And you got to get outside of yourself, get outside of that pity party. You know, one of the things that Dr. Chapman inadvertently created was that, well, if I tell you, Kyle, what my love language is, and you tell me what yours is, what happens when I don't send it your way? You're going to have this little pity party that's going to say, well, I told you what my love language is. How come you're not delivering it? And you get that little whiny voice, and you get that little pity party of your own. This eliminates everything. That you're not doing that. You're not expecting, you're not sitting around waiting for love to come your way. You're taking the active steps to send it out. And it's not about you anymore. It's about them. It's about creating a better life for them. And in doing that, suddenly, magically, it's a new life for you. Once you grasp onto what you're responsible for and what you can do, the difference that you can make in people's life, choose to make that difference. Choose to be that disruptor of the rage. Choose to be that person that is kind when everybody else is going the opposite direction. And if you do that, Other people have good enough hearts. I really believe this, that people have a lot of good in them. Start noticing the good. Start magnifying that good, because when you magnify anything, it's going to get larger. Who wants to magnify the faults of another? That's coming right back at you. They're going to be critical of you. Why would you do that? Why would you send that out? Instead of focus on magnifying what's right about that person, and then they'll look, hopefully they'll reflect that back to you. And I want to just bring up, as I'm talking about reflection, that Dr. Chapman in the books says that most people will send out what their primary love language is. They'll send it out hoping that they'll get it back on the reciprocity. I don't really believe in that reciprocity, because I think that's a transaction. It looks like a transaction. I give you something, you give me something back. That's a transaction. When you send it out without any regard of whether it's coming back or not, but just trusting that someday it might come back, just have that faith that it might come back, and just that hope that it might come back, that's different. But when you're sending it out expecting it to come back, then you're out of the love category and you're into the business transaction. It's a business at that point in time.
So how would someone come across your die?
The way they can order it, it's on my website. I kind of did a play on words. You actually roll the die, ROLL, the die, but the roll of love is what changes you within. So the website is roleoflove.com, and they can find the book, which explains all about it, the backstory, everything. They can find the journal, and then they can find the die. And I've got a special price on the set, the journal, the die, and the book on the website, roleoflove.com.
And what about your social media?
Social media, you can find it under Roll of Love Dice on Instagram, Facebook, and other social media sites. If people listening to this podcast like listening to podcasts or like listening to books, there is one other alternative for this. I did make an audible version of the book, and they can find that on Amazon. But instead of typing in Roll of Love on Amazon, you're going to get love this, love that, love a million things. Instead of doing that, just type in my name. It'll bring it right up to you.
Well, I will put those in the description to make it easy for folks to find you. Mr. Zolman, I really, really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you, Kyle. It's been my pleasure. You're a great host. Thank you.
And I also want to thank all you folks out there. If you are new to the channel, well, I hope you'll come back. Hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for your support. Because of you, you make it possible for me to do this. And until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network